Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for, oh, when I turn these on. Grace has them on. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Hopefully on the back. Okay, all right. Afternoon. Thanks, everybody, for coming this afternoon. Appreciate it. Today, I am joined by members of the Stop Project 2025 Task Force, as well as folks from across the diverse Democratic caucus who are helping to lead the charge against extreme MAGA Republicans' radical playbook of Project 2025. While Americans across the country look to leaders here in Washington, D.C. to solve problems, issues of critical importance facing our country, facing families across our land, our colleagues, regrettably, across the aisle, are charging forward in lockstep with the agenda outlined in Project 2025 by former President Trump. For anyone who's looking for proof of that, look no further than the actions of House Republicans over just the past few months and their attempts to provide huge new tax breaks to billionaires, their attacks on education and health care, environmental programs, as you'll hear from my colleagues, and of course their efforts to strip Americans of fundamental freedoms. These actions, in my view, are grossly out of step with the needs and the wants of the American public. And so really, the question is one for House Republicans. It's time for them to make a choice, Project 2025 or the American people. And it's regrettable that they have thus far chosen the former, perhaps best evidenced, by the way, by the actions of the House Republican caucus just yesterday in putting together a partisan, extreme continuing resolution, ultimately threatening a government shutdown and being incapable of even getting that extreme measure out of the House. With all that being said, I'm pleased to now hand over the reins here to the chairman of the Project 2025 Task Force, someone who's been leading this effort in the House over the course of the last 7 months, and that's Congressman Jared Huffman from California.
Thank you very much, Assistant Leader Neguse, and thanks everyone for being here. Joe, thank you for making Trump's Project 2025 the focus of this month's press conference. I co-founded the Congressional Stop Project 2025 Task Force back in the early summer. Why did I do that? Well, I have served in Congress for 12 years now, and during that period I have seen some pretty wild antics from Republicans in the House, attempting to chip away at our democratic institutions, trying to roll back decades of progress. I have seen the chaos and the division that Donald Trump has infused into our politics, including violent rhetoric and extreme policies that are completely beyond the pale of anything that has ever tried to pass for conservatism. But nowhere have I seen anything that compares to the threat to our democracy, to our individual rights, to the well-being of most Americans that is posed by Trump's Project 2025. Now, anyone who familiarizes themselves with this document can see for themselves that it is an unprecedented takeover plan. It tries to gut critical checks and balances that hold our democracy together. It proposes rolling back fundamental rights, imposing draconian policies that are deeply unpopular with most Americans, and it proposes an unprecedented level of government control and control over our lives, the lives of every person who calls America home. House Republicans, though, are not waiting for a second Trump presidency to get started on this agenda. Everywhere you turn in this Congress, extreme MAGA Republicans are working straight out of the pages of Project 2025. We're seeing it in committees, at roundtables. Every single day we see it on the House floor. Climate action, protections for the middle class, social safety nets, and abortion rights have all been on the chopping block in this Republican majority. And it's like they have lifted their entire legislative agenda right out of the pages of Project 2025. So sunlight, we know, is the best disinfectant. That's why our task force, along with the DPCC and many of our House Democratic colleagues, have been focused on doing something very simple but critically important, showing people what's actually in Project 2025, helping them just understand it, bringing it out of the shadows. If we make sure that every American knows the truth about what Trump and his allies here in Congress are planning and doing, we believe that is the best way to stop this dangerous agenda. Now, it's important to think about how a second Trump presidency would be different than the first time around. He now has absolute immunity, thanks to his radical Supreme Court. We know he will not have adults in the room next time around. His administration would not have any institutionalists to push back against his dangerous impulses. And unlike the chaos and lack of planning that marked his first presidency, he now has Project 2025, a very detailed strategic blueprint for not only advancing extreme policies, but for eliminating and circumventing all of the checks and balances and guardrails that might stand in his way. And this is very important. As disturbing as all of this is, it's important to remember that we've only seen the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Project 2025. Because on top of the 922 pages that they have actually published, that you can look up for yourself on the internet, they also have an extensive personnel program, including a resume database chock full of MAGA loyalists, a training academy to indoctrinate them. They call this their army. These are political operatives that they would use to repopulate the federal workforce after they have purged tens of thousands of civil servants. And perhaps the most concerning part that they won't show us, that they don't like to talk about, is the secret fourth pillar of Project 2025. This is their unreleased playbook outlining the steps for Trump's first 180 days in office. Now, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley and I have been working on this. We reached out to the Heritage Foundation last month demanding that they come before Congress, that they show the American people this part of their plan, this fourth pillar. And to no one's surprise, the architects of Trump's Project 2025 have ignored our request for transparency. We think the public deserves to know what executive orders, what emergency declarations, and other presidential directives have been secretly prepared for Trump to make good on his vow to be a day one dictator. So, today our Stop Project 2025 task force has launched a tip line to gather any and all information about the hidden fourth pillar. And given the extremism of the part we already know about, the published parts of Project 2025, and given the evasiveness of Heritage and its coalition in hiding the most controversial elements of their scheme, we are turning to the public, to anyone who may have seen or authored or come across any part of the secret fourth pillar of Project 2025. We want them to share that information, and we have a dedicated tip line to make that possible. We're going to keep doing everything that we can to uncover their full agenda, to stop this government takeover on behalf of the majority Americans who do not want to live under the dystopic grip of Project 2025. I have a fantastic group of colleagues doing this work alongside me, and I'm so grateful to Representative Lauren Underwood, who has taken an important step for our caucus by introducing a resolution to formally oppose Trump's Project 2025 and to highlight exactly why this plan is so dangerous. And so to hear more about that, I'd like to hand it over to Lauren Underwood.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us. We are here today to talk about Project 2025, Donald Trump's presidential transition project, an alarming and dangerous 920-page plan for destroying our democracy and imposing a radical agenda on our communities. I introduced House Resolution 1386 to condemn Donald Trump's Project 2025 because this plan strikes at the heart of our democracy as we know it. Project 2025 would take away our fundamental freedoms and radically alter the life of every American. Under this plan, women who seek abortions and the doctors who provide them could be jailed. The federal government would have the right to monitor our menstrual cycles, and fertility services like IVF would be banned. Working families and seniors would be devastated with deep cuts to Social Security and Medicare, making Americans work longer for less. Cuts to school meals for kids, eliminating Head Start for preschoolers, firing public school teachers across the country, on and on and on. And all of this just to hand massive tax breaks to billionaires, CEOs, and the biggest corporations. This plan is extreme in the truest sense of the word, and it does not reflect the values of our communities. Full stop. And as one of the only nurses in Congress, the most alarming parts of this plan for me are the attacks on our health care. It calls to eliminate provisions for people with pre-existing conditions like myself. It proposes a new tax on the people who get their health coverage from work, and it would cause the cost of prescription drugs to skyrocket. To put it simply, Donald Trump's Project 2025 will make more Americans sick and without the coverage they need to take care of themselves. When people tell you who they are, we must believe them. This document is not an abstract, rough draft collection of ideas. This document is a radical, detailed plan to seize power, to take over our government, and to completely change our way of life. It is 920 pages that outline exactly who Donald Trump is and where Republican priorities lie. It is dangerous for America, it is dangerous for our families, and it is dangerous for our communities. For more, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Kathy Castor.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Kathy Castor of Florida, and I'm here to talk about what is in this radical Project 2025 plan when it comes to the public health, climate, and clean energy. But let me start by saying I'm so proud to stand here with my colleagues who have been working day in and day out here in the Democratic caucus to lower costs, to grow the middle class, and build a safer, healthier America. And it's so important that we have organized a Project 2025 task force because folks across the country, they've heard of this, but they don't really understand how it's going to impact them in their day-to-day lives. And my message is hold on to your wallet, Americans, because if Project 2025 is enacted, you're going to be paying more. And let's talk about that, what that means when it comes to our environment. Project 2025 contains these very, very outlandish and expensive proposals, things that are going to raise costs and they're going to increase pollution. They want to make it easier to pollute in America. Now, I think Americans value clean air, clean water, cleaner, cheaper energy. What Project 2025 proposes is to take the cops off the beat at our Environmental Protection Agency, to eliminate the cops at EPA who enforce our clean air, clean water laws across the country. That impacts our health, especially communities that are on the front lines of polluting power plants and other dirty plants. They want to fully repeal parts of the tax code that are putting money back into people's pockets when it comes to clean and renewable energy. They don't like this one bit. Remember, we didn't get one Republican vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, that historic law that is putting money back into pocketbooks across the country. In fact, the Treasury Department reported just last week that if you take only the energy efficiency home improvement section, which are the heat pumps when your AC goes on the fritz, insulating your home, cheaper and more efficient appliances, and then if you want to afford solar, make that affordable. Already, just in 2023, that Inflation Reduction Act put $8 billion back into the pockets of American families at a time they could really use it. Project 2025 also, in addition to proposing to take all of those savings away from American families, it'll gut what we're trying to do to counter the Chinese Communist Party in this great competition on who's going to build the electric vehicles of the future. We want to build those here in America. We build the best cars in the world, and we're not going to cede leadership in that industry to the Chinese Communist Party. I think the one section that has gotten a lot of attention because it is so outlandish is Project 2025 would eliminate the National Weather Service under NOAA. So I know everyone here, especially Rhett Fletcher from Houston, but every American, you rely on the National Weather Service for up-to-date forecasts. I know I do. Right now, we're watching what could happen in the very hot waters of the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico. These storms spin up so quickly. There's no way that the American people would support a privatization, a sellout of basic weather information. They're not going to go with this radical Project 2025 plan. But it's not just about the weather. It's about your wallet. Thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act that Project 2025 proposes to rip out from under Americans, we have a booming clean energy economy. Manufacturing is back in America, all across the country. New clean energy jobs. We estimate that just over the past 2 years, over 334,000 new jobs have been created in the clean energy economy. But if Project 2025 and the folks, the GOP has their way, that manufacturing boom will come to a stop. We're not going to allow the special interests to have control through Project 2025, through the playbook written by the big oil companies. And how do we know who's really behind this? Think back to May of this year, when the former president was at Mar-a-Lago and hosted big oil lobbyists and executives for a meeting. And he promised them, if you give me $1 billion, we'll follow through on repealing all of those savings for American families in clean energy and energy efficiency manufacturing. House Democrats, we're not willing to sell out the American families and businesses. We're here to stop Project 2025 and make sure that you can live your life with lower cost, a growing middle class, and a thriving economy. I'm thrilled now to turn it over to my good friend, Representative Lizzie Fletcher of Texas.
Well, thank you so much, Congresswoman Castor. Thank you, Assistant Leader Neguse. Thanks to all of my colleagues up here, of course. Congressman Huffman for your leadership on this task force, Rep. Underwood for your resolution that you've introduced, and of course, I'll be glad to turn over in just a minute to my friend Chris DeLuzio. But first, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to talk more about our Democratic resolution led by Representative Underwood to oppose Project 2025, because it says important things that the American people know and must know about the things that they care about. And we've heard a little bit already. I just want to take a couple minutes to talk about something that we've heard referenced already, that if the plans outlined in 2025 are implemented, it would strip away Americans' most fundamental rights and freedoms. It would criminalize abortion nationwide. Doesn't matter where you live, it would criminalize abortion nationwide. It would block access to abortion pills and to medical equipment. It would restrict access to birth control. That's right. We're not talking about abortion. We're talking about birth control, contraception, whatever you call it. It would restrict access to birth control. And it would even ban fertility services that help families that are struggling, that are trying to get pregnant, like in vitro fertilization or IVF. It would even allow the government to monitor pregnancies and their outcomes. That really bears repeating. I know of no one who wants the government monitoring their pregnancies and their outcomes with the possibility, of course, of prosecuting women who have miscarriages, which is a very, very common and often devastating outcome of a pregnancy. And I know that this can happen, as outlandish as it sounds, because we have seen these policies implemented in my home state of Texas, where abortion is banned even in cases of rape and incest, and where women and families are in crisis. In our state, women are being turned away from hospitals and told to come back when they're sicker, when they're experiencing sepsis, when they're closer to death, because that is when doctors might be able to treat them, because otherwise doctors fear being prosecuted for treating them. Yesterday, we saw tragic reporting on deaths of Georgia women that show how these cruel laws are killing women and devastating families in states across our country. And make no mistake, Project 2025 makes this a reality for women in all 50 states, banning abortion nationwide and punishing women. Project 2025 is the blueprint for a second Trump presidency. Don't be fooled about that either. More than 80% of Project 2025's authors held formal roles in the last Trump administration. And to those who suggest that Democrats are being alarmist, I suggest that you take a closer look at what is already happening in Texas and states like it. Democrats in the House and across the country are fighting for our freedoms, for the health, dignity, and autonomy of women and their families across our country, and for working Americans and veterans. And I will now turn to my colleague, Chris DeLuzio, to talk a little bit more about that.
Congresswoman Fletcher, thank you. And it's a real treat to join my colleagues. My constituents in Western Pennsylvania, like I think so many good Americans, think our country has a sacred obligation to care for those who serve, to care for my fellow veterans. I use the VA like so many of my fellow veterans do, and I will tell you, Project 2025 really puts at risk our country's ability to care for veterans. It proposes to slash care and benefits for disabled veterans. It looks to cut costs on the backs of future disability rating awards and adjust those standards for existing claims. It continues this trend of outsourcing and privatizing care, where we know our government pays more for worse outcomes relative to what my fellow veterans often receive at VA. It could lead to disenrolling millions of veterans who don't have a service connection designation for care they want to seek within the VA. That could really hurt a lot of veterans. That is one of the main components of what Project 2025 seeks to do around veterans care. It endorses, Project 2025 endorses Trump-era efforts that tried to downsize and close VA hospitals. And as we all know here on the Hill, we just had to help the VA meet growing demand because of the success of the PACT Act. This is not the time we should be closing facilities in VA. We should be growing them. And yet, Project 2025 looks to save a few bucks, a lot of bucks, on the backs of veterans. And the question is why? You've heard about it. Massive tax cuts for billionaires, huge corporations. A typical family of four in Pennsylvania under Project 2025's tax plan would see a tax increase of around $3,000 a year. Now, if you make over $10 million a year, you'd get a $1.5 million tax cut. That's crazy to me. And it's not just working families. Union brothers and sisters would see their freedom at risk as well. What Project 2025 seeks to do, proposing a ban on card checks, one of the main strategies workers have to organize and form a union and bargain collectively, would weaken the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, its watchdog role overseeing workers' rights and organizing campaigns. It urges a ban on public employee unions and allows states to ban unions altogether. You know what's not in Project 2025? The PRO Act, which is a top priority of Democrats here in Washington to give workers all over this country the freedom to form and join a union. And we know what Project 2025 would mean for seniors and drug costs. It would take away the power of Medicare to negotiate drug prices, a total handout to Big Pharma at the expense of seniors who would see those bills go up. I call that rank corruption, but it is trying to take money out of the pockets of seniors to enrich Big Pharma. This is not a vision in Project 2025 that my constituents, that I think the American people want. It's important that they know what's in it and they see that folks around here are doing something to stand up against it. And my colleagues here are leading that fight. So I'm happy to turn it back over. Assistant Leader Neguse.
So again, I want to thank each and every one of my colleagues, and in particular, I want to thank Representative Underwood, DPCC Co-Chair Underwood, for introducing HRES 1386, which is a critical resolution in opposing Project 2025 for all of the reasons that my colleagues so eloquently articulated in terms of the impacts that it would have on American families, and would challenge House Republicans to take up the resolution. As Chairman Huffman referenced, sunlight being the best disinfectant. Let's have that debate about Congresswoman Underwood's resolution and ultimately Project 2025. In my view, I think that debate would be very illuminating for the American public. With that, we'll take some questions. Max?
Do you think the Democratic efforts to bring, as you said, sunlight to Project 2025 is making an impact with some voters who might not follow politics as closely as we do here in D.C.?
Yeah, I'd say a couple things. One, it is clear the more the American public learns about Project 2025, the more they oppose it. The policies that are embedded within Project 2025 are deeply unpopular with the American public, with the vast majority of Americans in Colorado and in Florida and California and Texas and Illinois, in Pennsylvania, you name it. And so I think it's important for us to expose more of Project 2025 and the dangerous ramifications it would have for the country. And that's precisely what HRES 1386 does, and why I'm so grateful to Congressman Underwood for introducing it. Yes, and then we'll go back.
Thanks so much for doing this. I'm curious, Donald Trump has been on the political stage for 9 years. He's looking to win another term. I'm curious if Democrats believe if you all take back the House, if Vice President Harris becomes president, do you believe that this will extinguish Trumpism, that this will start to turn the tide against some of what you all describe as these extreme radical proposals, or do you think that this will continue to have legs even if Donald Trump is defeated at the ballot box and you all retake the House in January?
I would just simply say I'm not going to opine on the election, from this podium, and so I would say House Democrats are focused on a hopeful, optimistic agenda. That's what we've been focused on from day one of the 118th Congress, putting people over politics, growing the middle class, lowering costs, building safer communities, ultimately the values and the issues that Americans care most about. And that will remain our focus. Beyond that, I don't know that I want to delve into the election from here. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for doing this, Professor. I wanted to ask Mr. Huffman actually about the Project 2025 hearings that you have planned. I heard they're January 6th style. I'd love to know what the goals are and what you hope to
Yeah, so thank you very much. I've been delighted with the way our caucus, including the DPCC, under the leadership of Representative Underwood and her colleagues, have made Trump's Project 2025 an important part of their work. And next week, the Steering and Policy Committee is doing something very important. They are having a hearing-type event here in the Capitol on Tuesday. It will include real stories from real people. It is going to be a very, very compelling event, but I should probably defer somewhat to my colleague Lauren Underwood if you want to speak any more about this. I'll be part of it. You're going to see some of the leaders of the House Democratic Caucus and certainly members of the Steering and Policy Committee Tuesday here in the Capitol. Very, very important event.
I would just also add that we've seen the MAGA extremists here in the House Republican Conference begin to pull out parts of Project 2025 as they pulled together their appropriations bills, most recently that failed yesterday, as they have pulled together so many extreme radical proposals across different policy topics. We're going to be calling out that extremism as part of these hearings as well, making sure the American people understand that their agenda is already being put to work. It is not something that's theoretical or hypothetical. The House Republicans have begun legislating Project 2025.
That last point is such an important one. It's I don't think it can be overstated. The legislation that we are taking up this week is inspired by Project 2025. You can find particular examples and trace them back from the resolutions that we voted on yesterday to to specific pages within this 900-page radical playbook. So, yes, and then
Congressman Underwood, you said hearings, plural. I know we talked about one on Tuesday. I think there's reporting out there about you guys kind of taking the show on the road a little bit. Are there specific states or areas that you think this message is better received in? They happen to also be 7 battleground states. I mean, like, where do you think we would be seeing you as you take this outside of the building?
When I said hearings, I meant hearing, and I'm really looking forward to participating next week. Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
But I will say that I have certainly been in conversations with leadership about the possibility of multiple hearings and doing some of those out in other parts of the country. I personally think that would be a great idea, and I think there's a great chance of that happening, but details TBD.
You could break the news, right?
yes, sir.
First of all, as a former weatherman, I appreciate the weather talk.
Wow.
Yeah.
Donald Trump has consistently tried to distance himself from Project 2025. Do you just not believe him, and you plan on continuing to tie him to it, even if he continues to disavow it?
Yeah. Anyone like to answer?
Look, we all know that you can't believe the time on Donald Trump's watch. He's said a lot of things, and on Project 2025, until very recently, he and Republicans at the highest level of their party were embracing and praising this effort by not just Heritage, which has always had a tremendous amount of influence into their policy agenda, but over 110 leading MAGA groups, including groups that, you know, some of our colleagues here in Congress have worked for in their prior lives. I'm talking about Speaker Mike Johnson, but many, many others. This is the inner MAGA circle that put this thing together. You've seen the numbers. I mean, you don't have to take Democrats' word for it, but hundreds, over 100 of the authors, editors, and contributors of this document came right out of Donald Trump's inner circle. He's on film talking about how this is going to be an important blueprint for their movement. So, look, they've definitely figured out that it's toxic with the American people. But that doesn't mean we should believe them when they fabricate about having nothing to do with it.
I would just simply add, and HRES 1386, I think, speaks to this broadly. The Republican Study Committee, of course, which the vast majority of the House Republican Conference are members, published a budget a year ago that includes some of the same gutting of core federal programs that Project 2025 includes. So this notion that they're not connected and now, as Congressman Huffman said, this attempt to disassociate themselves from it, I think, is a failing one.
But I need to give you one more little piece of this because it's just fun. It's just fun. Up until our Stop Project 2025 task force got rolling and the American people started tuning in to what's actually in this document, Donald Trump's super PAC had reserved a website that was Trump Project 2025 that went right to his super PAC. They were embracing this thing in every possible way. And then they quickly memory holed that and changed the link from that URL to go to a series of self-serving rebuttal points about what Democrats are saying about Project 2025. So, look, these people are not very believable, and we could spend the rest of our time together having lots of fun poking holes in what they're saying.
Any questions? Okay. All right. Thanks again for coming. We appreciate it.
Thanks, team.
Wow. Nice job.